In this section, we'll look at Eisenhower's foreign policy from about 1954 to 1956. Eisenhower, you recall, was convinced that the United States couldn't let even the smallest domino fall. He accepted NSC 68. And what we're going to see is that Eisenhower wasn't just going to rely on massive retaliation of the New Look policy or the rather Machiavellian actions of the CIA. He's also going to begin in the mid-1950s to try to form mutual defense pacts. The Korean War was just over, and Secretary of State Dulles urged the creation of what became known as the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, or CENTO for short, with its headquarters in Bangkok. CENTO included the United States, Britain, France, Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines, Thailand, and Pakistan. And while CENTO proved that Eisenhower and Secretary of State Dulles were not just pressing massive retaliation brinkmanship, but also efforts at collective security, in fact, CENTO was more symbolic than truly effective. It possessed no military forces of its own and no centralized command structure. Strategically, the wide area really posed tremendous defensive problems, especially when half the member nations weren't even geographically contiguous. The alliance, moreover, was crippled by the absence of India, Burma, and Indonesia, whose governments preferred neutrality to military alliance with the West. Just after the formation of CENTO in 1954, the United States also helped form the Central Treaty Organization, or CENTO, in 1955. Secretary of State Dulles and Eisenhower wanted CENTO to form among the oil-rich countries in the Middle East, but they were hobbled by the ongoing Israeli-Arab conflict. Dulles knew that the Jewish lobbying Congress would block former participation of the U.S. in any alliance with an Arab or Persian nation, so the U.S. didn't officially join CENTO. It did, however, encourage the other countries in the area to join the Mutual Anti-Communist Defense Pact and promised military and economic aid to those countries that did officially join. The original members included Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and the United Kingdom. After 1956's Suez crisis, which will be discussed later in a later section, Iraq, however, pulled out. The Arab countries had by that time become increasingly unlikely to join with any Western nations. Anyway, with CENTO based in Ankara, Turkey, the organization had the same flaws as CENTO. It had no military organization and no recognized command structure. In the Middle East, it appeared the Eisenhower administration had at least pretty significant success in October 1954 when Secretary of State Dulles helped mediate a dispute between Great Britain and Egypt. Britain had a base in the Suez along the canal, and Egypt wanted to have more control in the canal zone. And according to the treaty, Britain agreed to give up rights to its base and agreed to evacuate all armed forces from the canal zone within 20 months. And Egypt agreed in return to keep the base in combat readiness and to prevent the re-entry of British troops if anybody else tried to attack the canal or keep anybody from passing through it. You know, Secretary Dulles and the British hoped that Egypt under the new regime headed by General Gamal Abdel Nasser would cooperate to reduce Arab-Israeli tensions and sort of build a collective defense system. The problem was that these tensions were really just too much, and after a major Israeli raid on the Egyptian territory of Gaza in February of 1954, Nasser is going to realize that he doesn't have the adequate military, and he's going to be really angry as well over the formation of CENTO. He saw it as anti-Arab, and so what he ended up doing was he concluded an arms agreement with the communist bloc in September 1955. Nasser exchanged Egyptian rice and cotton for Czechoslovakian tanks, planes, artillery, and other equipment. And, Arab nationalists in every country now turned to Nasser for leadership against Israel, and Egypt concluded defense alliances and military arrangements with Syria and Saudi Arabia in October. As this was going on, America's commitment to Southeast Asia was really put to the test when Communist China began to bomb the islands of Quemoy and Matsu between the mainland and Taiwan. The U.S. had just signed a mutual defense treaty with the Republic of China and Taiwan, but it was unclear if the treaty covered the islands. Tensions remained high for years as the United States debated its obligations, and the future of the islands even becoming part of a partisan political tensions in Washington. In the end, the islands remained in the hands of the Republic of China, Taiwan. When it came to direct relations between the United States and the Soviet Union, the Eisenhower administration virtually coincided with the death on March 5, 1953, of Joseph Stalin. The vacuum that this created at the top of the Soviet hierarchy, after 25 years of dictatorial rule, began a struggle for control of power, and there were a number of pretenders who were struggling among the elite in the Soviet Union for power. Probably because of the uncertainties of the post-Stalin successors, the Soviet leaders sort of undertook a less aggressive foreign policy. They talked for relaxing tensions and maybe debating some of the deadlock questions, even hinting at some concessions. When Russia agreed in May 1955 to conclude a treaty restoring Austria's independence and ending the four-power occupation that had been in the country since then, it did much to persuade the West that the new Soviet leaders, maybe they genuinely desired better relations. Plans for a summit meeting were quickly drawn, and President Eisenhower and the British Prime Minister and the Premier of France agreed to meet with the Nikolai Bulganin, who was at that time the head of the Soviet Union, and to discuss some of the issues that were dividing the East and the West. And they met in Geneva in July 1955, and this Geneva conference really raised high hopes. It had a relaxed atmosphere, probably encouraged by an abundance of vodka and martinis and all that. But it really, people spoke of the spirit of Geneva, and it really encouraged people. Although in actuality, not much of substance was accomplished. As Eisenhower's first term neared its conclusion, it was becoming apparent to many observers that Nikita Khrushchev was consolidating his power in the Soviet Union. He was the first secretary of the Communist Party, and in fact, he would become premier right after Eisenhower's second term began in 1957. Khrushchev was from humble origins. He worked as a metal worker in his youth. And when he was rising in power in 1956, he gave a speech which he denounced the Stalin purges, and certainly the United States welcomed that, and he seemed committed to better relations with the United States and the West. In fact, the Soviets may have been more open to better direct relations with the U.S., but they weren't about to lose their control of the satellite nations. When opportunistic nationalists in Hungary began an uprising in October of 1956, the Soviets sent in tanks and just brutally crushed the rebellion. In the end, 2,500 Hungarians and over 700 Soviet troops died in the fighting. This concludes a section on Eisenhower's foreign policy from 1954 to 1956.